Kia ora koutou everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. It's so good to see so many of you online to hear about this year's enforcement priorities, some of the areas we've been looking at, and of course at the end we're keen to hear your questions. Right, we'll start first of all by introducing our panel. They should be pretty familiar to you. First of all, we've got our chair, Dr. John Small. Afternoon, John.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nick.
And we have our deputy chair, Anne Callinan. Afternoon, Anne.
Afternoon, Nick.
As I say, it's great to have so many of you online today. We will rip into some questions with John and Anne very shortly, but first of all, we're going to run through those priorities so they are fresh in your mind. So in terms of our enduring priorities for this year, we have, and you should be able to see these on screen, cartels, anti-competitive conduct, actions that support our market and economic regulation functions. We have product safety, and this year we have a new enduring priority, which is, as you can see there, non-notified mergers. Switching over very quickly to our specific priorities, I'll take you through last year's and then the changes this year as well. So we have there for last year cartels and public procurement. Of course, we have online sales conduct and breaches in the grocery sector. And three more there from last year, breaches in the telecommunications sector, motor vehicle sales and finance, and of course, unconscionable conduct. We'll have a lot to say about that shortly. In terms of this year's specific priorities, we have three at the top that we're retaining. You can see there cartels and public procurement again, online sales conduct, and also retained is breaches in the grocery sector. And we have two new specific priorities this year, which, as you can see, are pricing and promotional practices and exclusive arrangements that impact competition. Now, if you want to keep those fresh in your mind, we're going to put a link up to these new specific and enduring priorities in the Slido toolbar that you should be able to see on your screen. That link should be there now. If you want to refer to them at all as we go through our topics, then just click on that and that will take you to them. And on Slido, it should be built into your screen this year. So if you have the webinar window minimized, it should be sitting just alongside. If you maximise the webinar window at all, you will need to make it smaller again to submit a question. In terms of the structure, we will have, of course, a Q&A with Anne and John, first of all, to run across some of last year's activity, and then we will try and keep about 15 minutes at the end for questions. We really, really do want your questions, so please do remember to get them in. We're going to be covering a lot, and I'll run through that now. So we've got competition, cartels, mergers, unconscionable conduct. We're going to be covering our work in the fuel and grocery sectors and in product safety, online sales conduct as well, and promotional practices. And of course, we will look back at a function that we've just handed over to the FMA, which of course is our credit function. And so that's a lot of ground to cover today. So as I say, please refresh yourself with those priorities throughout if you need to at any stage. But enough from me, we'll rip straight into it. We'll go to John first. John, we're going to start with anti-competitive conduct and cartels. We know that as a commission we remain keen to prioritise those areas, and there's been a couple of, or one case in particular lately that I'd like you to just run through for us if you could.
Yes, certainly, Nick. So this is the courier sector action. Let me just, before I talk about that, just emphasise why this is an important sector. I mean, it should probably be obvious to people, but you know, we're a long, spread out country, and transport and logistics is super important for the good functioning of our economy, which is beneficial to all of us. So. And the other thing about transport and logistics is that they are an input into a whole lot of other business activity. Lots of people need couriers and things freighted around in order to run their own businesses properly. So if there's competition problems before stuff even gets to you, then these businesses are paying extra for that, and that's going to flow on through and create more inefficiencies in the economy. So because it's slightly upstream, that makes it particularly important. So the action we're talking about here is in the courier sector, and what we found there was quite a wide range of concerning conduct. The two I want to talk about in particular are customer allocation, which is a situation where, say, you and I were supposed to be, we are competing against each other, but we've got some side deal that says these are my customers and those are yours, and you don't go into my customers and I don't approach your customers. So that's dividing up the market. That's actually cartel conduct. It's very detrimental to everybody. Two companies were found to be doing that. One was Aramex, and the other is Go Sweet Spot. Making things slightly worse, Aramex was also found to be fixing prices with its competitors. So that's just what it sounds like. It's you and I supposed to be giving competitive quotes, but we've already agreed around the back that we know what the prices are going to be. I know yours, you know mine. So pretty serious conduct. Those companies were fined $500,000 and $700,000 respectively. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide there that quite a long list of well-known courier brands that were also warned for the same kind of conduct in the context of the same investigation. So they were basically doing similar things, but it just did not quite rise to the level of court action.
Yeah, that's obviously the cartels side of things. But in terms of broader anti-competitive conduct, there's another case that we took in the last year, or another matter we looked into in the last year that you wanted to cover as well, involving Velocity. And actually, while you're on that, is there anything else, sort of in the pipeline?
Yes, so the Velocity matter is really interesting. I'm sure it will be very interesting to many people because Velocity is one of these relatively modern platform businesses. It's an online platform that matches two sets of people. In this case, it was property valuers, real estate valuers, who were joined up to the platform, and then anybody who needed a valuation could acquire that valuation through the platform for getting a mortgage or whatever on a house. And so in theory, that's a great concept, right? It's just the kind of modern, efficient business that you might want to come out of New Zealand and go international, as in fact they are. Trouble was that the way that it had been set up eliminated all of the competition between the valuers and essentially allocated customers and set the prices. So we were pretty concerned about that. We recognised it's an innovative business model and has got some efficiencies, but we couldn't tolerate that. And so we went to Velocity and told them what we were concerned about. And long story short, they came to the party, changed their website, and so to the point where we're satisfied with it now. But if the sort of situation where if that hadn't happened, we would have had to prosecute. We would have prosecuted them. And then generally, you asked about the pipeline of that sort of matter, which is generally anti-competitive conduct, contrary to say the lawyers think it was Part 2 of the Commerce Act. I'd say that it's a long time since we've had such a strong pipeline of matters in that area. There's a number of them under investigation, and people can expect to see more action in there fairly soon.
Yeah, and just sort of moving on, staying with the competition side of things, but people will have noticed up the top that this year we've added exclusive agreements as a specific priority. So what exactly is your thinking there and the board's thinking there?
Yes, so look, this is something that we've become increasingly concerned about. We did mention one of these matters, I think we mentioned it in the seminar last year, which was the Winston Wallboards case that's currently before the courts. And that's a case where we're alleging that the way that suppliers of jibboard were priced had the effect of excluding rivals to that market, and so it's really of concern if a large firm that's got substantial market power, a big share of the market, is able to use that in a way to exclude and to prevent people from being in the market or to drive them out of the market. There's nothing wrong with, in fact, competing hard, and if that ends up driving inefficient firms out of the market, so be it. that's how the process is supposed to work. But this is something different. This is where it rises above that. It's often it would be a use of market power with the effect of doing that. So having a focused approach on this by making it a priority, an enforcement priority, will help us in the Commission to prioritise and I think help the business community to understand that this is something we're really concerned about.
Yeah, thanks, John. We'll come back to you shortly, but Anne, I just want to jump over to you. We sort of started with cartels enforcement. That obviously remains a real area of focus for us. So could you tell us a little bit, and it's an enduring priority, so could you tell us a little bit about what else is going on in that area?
Sure. So last year, I think we mentioned a case that we were about to take in the real estate sector, and I can say a little bit more about that because the case has now been filed. So that's a case that we've taken against a number of Harcourts franchisees and Harcourts itself in the Christchurch market. And our view is that the Harcourts franchises are operating sufficiently close to each other that they're actually competing with each other in that Christchurch market. And we allege that the franchisees and Harcourts entered into an arrangement between them, a horizontal arrangement that amounted to cartel conduct, and in particular included price fixing in relation to commission levels, artificially constraining competition between those franchises on commission levels. And we thought that was a really serious issue because, it's hard enough to buy a house and the commission that you pay to the real estate agent is a pretty significant amount of money. Absolutely. So it's really important to New Zealand consumers that market is competitive. So we've taken this case against those Harcourt entities. It's still in court, so we'll wait to see, I guess, how that one pans out.
Yeah, that's obviously the sort of enforcement side of cartels, and John covered another case earlier. But could you talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, the stuff that people don't necessarily see, where we are trying to sort of get ahead of the harm and stop these things before they occur through education?
Sure. But before I do that, I did meant to mention another case that we've just concluded, and that is the wind-up of the first criminal cartel case that we took, and there was another company involved in that conduct called Chelsea, and they were convicted. You'll see from the slides that were up that they were fined $30,000 for that criminal conduct. That might not sound like a lot, but the court quite rightly took into account the financial means of that company in setting the fine, and the judge indicated that had it not been for that, the fine would have been around about $600,000. But just coming back to your question, Nick, what are we doing other than taking these cases? Well, look, the cartels team in particular just does a lot of outreach work, and because one of our specific priorities last year and going forward is cartel conduct in relation to public procurement, our team has been out there talking to hundreds of businesses, to central and local government, to trade associations, giving them tips about what red flags to watch out for in case they might be the victims of cartel conduct, what to look for in terms of bid rigging, covered pricing and other suspicious activities. And we're pleased to say that that outreach work has led to 2 current investigations that we've got in the pipeline. But separate from that, because of the war in Iran and the fuel cost increases at the moment, our teams have been out talking to people in the business community about the do's and the don'ts in relation to what you can do with fuel surcharges. Like many businesses we see are imposing fuel surcharges. I mean, we understand that, but don't actually collude over what the level of that surcharge is going to be. That could be cartel conduct. And from a Fair Trading Act perspective, if you're going to tell a customer that this is a fuel surcharge, make sure it's for fuel and not something else. It's just basically not misleading your customers. So there's been a lot of outreach work in addition to the court work.
That's the stuff that people sort of don't see necessarily out there. We talk a lot about enforcement, but there's a lot else going on, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what we're talking about today, a lot of it is that hard edge, the pointy end of the enforcement work, but one of our strategies is to get ahead of the harms, and that's where this outreach and engagement work really pays dividends.
Yeah. Thanks, Anne. I'll come back to you. But John, I'll come to you now because people probably noticed up the top that non-notified mergers is the one new enduring priority that we've introduced. So can you tell us what the thinking is there?
Yes, certainly. I think to explain this, really need to start by looking at the way our merger control regime works. First of all, the reason that we have merger control is because some transactions that where firms are buying each other do have the potential to create excessive market power and to substantially lessen competition. So all countries in the world have some way of monitoring that and trying to stop that conduct from happening. Bearing in mind, of course, that once such a transaction has occurred, it's pretty much a permanent feature of the landscape. So that's why it's important. Now, in New Zealand, our system for managing mergers is a voluntary one. And so what that means is that that firms and their advisors, they self-assess. They look at something, the deal they want to do, and they say, is this going to cause competition problems? Yes or no. And if there's some risk in there, then they would be well advised to call us up and tell us about it. And sometimes we look at that and say, probably okay. Other times we say, look, you should really apply for clearance. There's some issues in here. And sometimes, though, firms just don't tell us. And that's what we're talking about here, non-notified mergers that have the effect or likely effect of substantially lessening competition. And so the ones that should have come to us to be properly assessed, but they didn't. They just went ahead and did it. So that is definitely of concern. And one of the big reasons it's of concern is that if we don't prosecute that kind of conduct when we see it, it completely undermines the credibility of our voluntary system. So if you have a system where you don't have to come in, but you're strongly advised to, and so therefore you need a control if people don't. And so that's why we think it's worth having as a priority. That'll help us to get more focus on it, and also signal to the business community why that we think it's pretty important. There's been some other changes underway or proposed in the Commerce Act amendments for the way the merger process works. We've been working pretty hard on our own merger processes as well. Some of the new provisions that are in the bill, not yet passed, do things like allow us to accept a behavioural undertaking. So that would mean that we could say to firms, yes, you can merge as long as you undertake to do or to not do these things. So it's a conditional kind of clearance. And that, I think, could be helpful in some situations.
Yeah, and there is a case that you wanted to mention that sort of applies to this that is quite recent.
Oh, yes, the non-notified mergers. Yes, there is. Yes, this was a merger that was transacted in the Waikato, two companies, Alderson's Logistics and Super Shavings. Alderson's bought Super Shavings. They were previous to that transaction, they were both supplying wood chips and wood shavings into animal farming operations, mostly in the Waikato. So chicken farming, goat farming, they put it down for bedding.
Animal bedding, yeah.
And so, arguably a niche market, but a pretty important one for firms that are affected by that. And so, they just went ahead and did it. We found out through our surveillance function, which is another one of these unseen things that the commission staff do. They're out there all the time looking for such cases. So we prosecuted them. They've ended up paying a penalty of $420,000. We tried very hard to get them to unscramble those eggs to sell off the other, but that was proved after quite a bit of effort. That proved impossible. So they've copped to the penalty, and that's the outcome.
Yeah, thanks, John. We'll come back to you shortly. But Anne, unconscionable conduct, there's been a lot happening in that area. Again, people would have seen up the top that it was a specific priority for us last year. So can you tell us about some of what we saw in that area last year?
Sure. There's been 3 things in particular I want to mention. The first is a case that we took against a company called HouseSmile, which is now in liquidation. It was found guilty of unconscionable conduct and fined $60,000 in order to pay $7,500 to the victim of the conduct. But essentially that case involved repeated unsolicited sales calls to an elderly woman who was known by the company to have been suffering from dementia. So that, in our view, really clearly crossed the line, and we're pleased with the outcome there. Last year, we also filed charges against a company called Brand Developers Limited. People might know them as the TV shop, and they run prominent infomercials on television advertising a whole range of well-known brands. The case is ongoing, but our allegation is that brand developers engaged in misleading and exploitative business practices. We say they were unfair, high-pressure sales tactics. And again, we saw from the evidence that we gathered some very vulnerable people involved in this, some elderly people, people who were known to have dementia, and one person in particular who was known to be suffering from a terminal illness. So that case is yet to be resolved, but we've decided to take it, and we'll see how that turns out. And the third thing I wanted to mention, and I'm a little bit limited in what we can say about this, but we've decided to take a case against a business for alleged unconscionable conduct in a business-to-business situation. So that's the first time we've tackled that type of dynamic. So, I mean, obviously in a business negotiation, you can be tough. That's absolutely fine. But on the facts of this case, we believe that a large company involved has actually really crossed the line into something that's unconscionable. So that's something we'll be able to make some public statements about probably in the next few months.
Yeah, and people, of course, would have noticed that if they look at our specific priorities this year, unconscionable conduct is not there. So if I'm a business, can I go about this sort of behaviour and rest easy?
Absolutely not. Please don't get comfortable. We will definitely keep a close eye on unconscionable conduct. We're really keen to hear of further examples of that. And I say that because by definition something that's unconscionable is so out of the usual norms that are acceptable in society, it's likely to be serious. And so if businesses are involved in this kind of conduct, I would say there's still a high risk of prosecution. I mean, I just want to make the point generally that just because something isn't in our specific priorities, it doesn't mean that we won't take action. It just for us is signposting the things that we are most interested in a particular period of time that we're more likely to take action on.
What you're saying is it's, I guess, almost a given in a way that if we saw unconscionability, really poor behaviour towards, let's say, a consumer, we would look at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Anne. We'll come back to you shortly. John, I just want to move into another area because, of course, an enduring priority is sort of, I guess, activity that supports the markets we regulate. And grocery is one of them. We've talked about grocery a lot recently. But could you just sort of give us an overview, I guess, of our activity there?
Yes, how long have you got, Nick?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Look, there's a lot going on in that space. A lot of it is not enforcement. We'll be talking about some enforcement actions here, but there's plenty of other activity that we are pushing on with in that space that involves, trying to get positive change in ways that don't involve actually prosecuting people. But that said, we've got several laws and provisions that we can use to tackle issues in the grocery sector. We've got the Fair Trading Act, the Commerce Act, the Grocery Industry Competition Act, and the Grocery Supply Code. So we're looking right across that that whole set of provisions when we look at trying to affect change in the grocery sector. I'd probably highlight some cases, fair trading cases to start with, which are two prosecutions of pack and save operators for misleading specials and inaccurate pricing. So this is things like, if you go into the shop and it says one price on the shelf and then you get charged something else, that's potentially misleading. And with specials, Anne's going to talk about some of these special type issues later on, but they are, they have to be genuine specials. Both those pack and save operators have pleaded guilty, and so we're awaiting sentencing for those. There's also a prosecution of Woolworths for similar conduct, and that's ongoing. So quite important fair trade and consumer protection work in that space. I think we mentioned last time that we've got ongoing action before the courts against Foodstuffs, North Island and Gilmore's, and this is alleging cartel conduct and breaches of the good faith provisions in the grocery code. And then people would have seen our grocery commissioner recently talking about our work in the wholesale area, where the large retailers are selling groceries on a wholesale basis to corner dairies and other supermarkets. That's a really important line of activity for us because that's potentially a way of stimulating more competition for the big supermarkets. We've had an inquiry underway in that space for some time. We've come to the conclusion, as our grocery commissioner announced recently, that the best way to deal with this is to have an enforcement focus on things that we call rebates, discounts and promotions. This is a kind of catch-all term for a whole lot of money that flows into these big retailers from suppliers. So we know that it's at the retail end, this is about a $23 billion business, but there's also about $6 billion that's coming the other way from suppliers. And we're going to be targeting that kind of, those payments. There's a huge variety of them. There's more than 50 different fees of one sort or another that add up to a total of $6 billion. And we're going to be testing that for compliance against the grocery code and against the Act, because we think that's actually quite key and important to driving more competition in the sector.
Lots going on in groceries, and we're going to switch now and to obviously another sector that we regulate, fuel, because that's been the sort of the talk of the town this year for obvious reasons, hasn't it? But could you just talk to us about what's noteworthy in that area?
Yeah, sure.
There's a couple of cases and then sort of a general sort of comment.
There's a few things there that are worth mentioning, Nick. The first is that last year we took a case against Mobil under the Fuel Industry Act, and that was in relation to Mobil's wholesale pricings to Mobil dealers. So the dealer that you get your petrol off, they're selling that fuel to them at a wholesale level. And the Act requires that those prices to be transparent so that it can support good bargaining between Mobil as a wholesaler and the dealer who's selling it, and that in turn is intended to support better retail pricing for consumers. So what we say is that Mobil hasn't provided sufficiently transparent pricing to its wholesale customers, and that matters in court, and again we'll see where that one gets to. Secondly, we've announced proceedings this year under the Fair Trading Act against BP. That's also ongoing, but we allege that BP's customers didn't receive some of the discounts that they've been promised, including discounts associated with their arrangements with Woolworths, where you shop at Woolworths and you get a discount. So we believe that consumers have been misled over that, and we've taken that to court. But in that context, I really just want to emphasise that we do believe that all companies, but particularly large and well-resourced companies, do need to get this kind of thing right, because consumers do make their choices based on those promotions and specials, and particularly when it's relating to essential goods and services like fuel and groceries and others we can think of. It's really important in the current environment that consumers can trust that those promotions are actually genuine. So that's one of the reasons we took this case. But more generally, because of what's happening with fuel prices, our fuel team has been monitoring pricing and shining a light on how quickly prices are going up and whether prices are coming down as you would expect, as there are fluctuations in international oil prices. We think that provides extra transparency also for consumers, so they can help them shop around. And our staff are going out and getting the message across to businesses that if you're promising something by way of a fuel surcharge and you're representing that it's a surcharge for fuel, please make sure it's about fuel and nothing else, otherwise you might be misleading consumers.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. We're going to move right along because, well, we said fuel was the talk of the town. Product safety has been another big topic this year, John.
Yes,
and so therefore for us it remains an enduring priority. So could you just talk us through, it often impacts vulnerable consumers, we know that. So talk us through some of the work we've done there, please.
Yeah, this is a space that's really dear to the heart of the people who work in this area at the Commission. They're really very, very dedicated. A lot of it actually revolves around children's toys, particularly for things that are targeted at children aged less than 3. And we're particularly worried about choking hazards there. So there's a process, an actual testing process that people should really be aware of that involves basically taking a toy that a 2-year-old might deal with and playing with it like a 2-year-old will play with it. So throwing it on the floor, bashing it against people, etc. And then if in the process of that something comes off, a part gets liberated, then that could become a choking hazard. So it's quite a fair, reasonable and understandable provision that you shouldn't have choking hazards. So we've had quite a few problems with this, particularly with a company called Panellists, which has got stores in Christchurch and Wellington. When we went and looked at their merchandise, we found a wide range of non-compliant toys, which we got taken off the shelves pretty quickly. Panellists agreed to some undertakings to not do that again. We found it to be sufficiently serious that we are prosecuting them as well. So we'll see where that goes. In terms of prosecutions that have been completed, the warehouse admitted breaches and got a fine of $234,000 in the last 12 months. And there's also been a lot of outreach and kind of that stuff that we were talking about previously, the getting ahead of.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that because sort of cases aside, you've covered a couple of cases, but cases aside, what are you actually doing with industry to engage with them on this matter, on the subject?
Exactly, it's a really good point. That's the hard edge stuff.
Yep.
But getting ahead of the harm, there's been a lot going on. Our team has been engaging pretty intensively with a number of traders. Temu, for example, I know that a lot of people buy stuff off Temu. We've had really good engagement with them that has resulted in them actually banning certain products. So that's helpful. I should add, by the way, that we'll talk to any company about this kind of stuff. If you've got some concerns in this space, let us know. We're happy to talk to you. We've also gone a bit further. We've actually made a little video that designed to demonstrate how there's this testing process.
It's sort of a series, isn't it?
Yeah. And sent that out. And we've been really pleased with the uptake, actually. That video series has been taken on board by a number of retailers and retail organisations. So Retail NZ, the Toy Distributors Association, Kmart, Trade Me, Temu, and they're actually using it to train their staff. Right. So this is kind of what we want. We want compliance programs and compliance training so that these things don't get onto the shelves in the first place.
This is sort of the softer power stuff. The soft power stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Really interesting. and we're going to move to online sales conduct because that is obviously, well, extremely relevant in this day and age. It's a specific it was a specific priority last year. It remains the case for this year. What are you seeing in that space?
Well, look, what we're seeing is a focus at the moment on reviews that are misleading, and that's been something that we've been working on in the last 12 months. We expect a sentencing outcome soon in relation to another fair trading case that we took against brand developers, not the one I just mentioned.
Yep.
And in that case, some of the staff of the company had written reviews of products that they hadn't actually even used, which were potentially misleading. And the conduct also involved the methodical removal of low ratings reviews that were coming in from customers, which had the effect of artificially inflating the reviews on the website, making the star rating look better than it really should have been. And but this is serious stuff, because as consumers, when we're shopping online, we're often looking at, what's the star rating. We need to be able to have a reasonable degree of trust and confidence that that rating isn't being manipulated in a way that's just not true. And it's not just important for consumers that's right, it's really important for the other businesses that are actually putting out accurate ratings of their products and services. So we think that was an important one. Another interesting case or investigation we're taking is against a company called Top Reviews. They're based offshore, and their business model is to provide so-called independent review and rating services for a whole range of products and services with so-called expert reviewers to try to lend credibility to the reviews that a company might get for their products. So the company will buy that service off Top Reviews to boost their marketing. The problem was that we've had a lot of complaints about this company. Sometimes we weren't confident that they were actually reviewing the product at all before they posted the review. And we actually had concerns around some of the reviewers who were put on their website as reviewers, whether they were actually genuinely involved in the process of review, to the point where one of the reviewers on the website that we contacted didn't even know his name and profile was put on their website as a reviewer until we contacted him. So needless to say, he hadn't done any reviews for Top Reviews.
It was news to him.
It was news to him. An unhappy surprise. So look, we have somewhat unusually taken the step of saying, look, we have real concerns about people dealing with this company. We don't recommend you do, and we are continuing to investigate them. So I expect there'll be some further steps down the track on that one. And lastly, just to catch people up, I think we talked about a case against HelloFresh, meal kit company, in relation to something that was kind of similar to a subscription trap last year. That case has been concluded, and HelloFresh was fined $845,000 for breaking the Fair Trading Act.
We'll stay sort of similar-ish sort of area. On promotional pricing, and actually just before I move to that, we just want to remind people to start getting your questions in because we're not far off question time. Promotional pricing has been added as a priority this year, and can you tell us why?
Sure. Look, quite simply, we're continuing to see a lot of concerns in this space. We have one case in the pipeline against Noel Leeming, which includes allegations that they haven't met their price promise. But we continue to see businesses use what we call was now pricing. So the product was $50 today. It's $30 on discount, and that's great if it's accurate. So it's really a nice, transparent way for consumers to see the value that they're getting. But it only really works if the was price is accurate. And so we've got concerns across a number of businesses that the was now pricing isn't accurate, and we're signalling here with these priorities that that's something we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, and just lastly, could I just get your sort of 2 cents on fair trading matters changing to civil, and also penalties increasing, and what you think that will do in terms of providing a deterrence.
But we're really pleased that a bill has been introduced to change the Fair Trading Act penalty regime, and it will change the regime for most essential Fair Trading Act breaches from a criminal standard to a civil standard, and with that comes a much higher potential maximum penalty, up from $600,000 per contravention to $5 million. We believe that gives us a better tool in our toolkit to deter the kind of consumer harms that we're worried about, and to better protect consumers and businesses. So we welcome that coming through.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. John, I want to talk about credit. People will know that credit has obviously just been transferred over to the FMA.
Yeah.
We had it for, 20 years, I think it was. So could you talk to us about, give us an overview of that 20 years and what we managed to get done. And could you also just rattle off a few sort of recent cases that we had to close things out before that transfer?
Yeah, sure. That's right. Yes. So we recently took our credit team, our wonderful credit team, we all walked across to the FMA and handed them over officially. So they're getting a very high quality.
Not far away, just down the road.
Exactly. They're getting a very high quality team who know their stuff inside out, and are a really high performing unit. So. So we feel like, the function's still going to be well looked after. While we had it at the Commission, I think it actually changed us a little bit internally in terms of giving us much more visibility of some of the, the struggles of vulnerable consumers, people who just need a loan to get through to the next payday kind of thing, and are quite exposed to, really frankly dodgy practices. From through that function, we've interacted with, we've taken a large number of cases, probably about 60 cases, I think, in the 20 years. We've had penalties in the order of $100 million plus. There's been almost that much, 90 odd million, that's actually been remediated back into people's pockets from whence it came, which is very satisfying. I suppose to sort of tip my hat to the team, they really powered through a whole lot of work in the last year. It's sort of consistent with the overall level of activity at the Commission, where our litigation is running kind of 50% above norms, recent norms. But these people really performed big time. Settlements against ASB, TSB, Nelson Building Society, big fines against Co-op Bank and Westpac of 2.5, 3.6 million. And I suppose at the other end of the scale, finally bringing the long-running saga of Nani loans to an end, with Mrs. Malupo, who was the perpetrator of that conduct, being banned for 2 years for targeting vulnerable consumers, acting as an unregistered lender, interest rates of 15% per week. Quite shocking stuff. But look, I mean, it's been it's kind of bittersweet, I suppose. It's been a good function to have. We've learned a lot from working in that space. We're sad to see them go, but sure, we're confident it'll be in good hands. Absolutely.
Thanks very much, John. Right, we're going to move to some broader questions, and I'll just chuck this one out to the floor, really. Personalised pricing is sort of something we're starting to hear more and more about. And you might want to take this very quickly, what is it and what do we think?
Yeah, so I'm certainly hearing a lot about this internationally, and personalised pricing, it's not dynamic pricing, so it's not just something that changes as you're looking at a price. But it's a price that might be tailored for you, Nick, based on data that has been gathered about you, your shopping habits, your demographics, a whole lot of factors personal to you, and it'll be a different price from the one that John gets.
Right.
But you won't necessarily know that.
I don't know what John's
You
getting.
don't know.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
you're getting, but you don't know that someone has used your data to give you a personalised price. And so you won't be able to judge whether that price is a good price or a bad price, right? And this is cropping up with the increased use of algorithms internationally, and some regulators offshore are concerned about it. And it's not that the pricing per se is problematic, but it's the fact that consumers don't know that their data is being used to give them a personalised price. So in some other jurisdictions, we're seeing laws created where you have to disclose that a person's received a personalised price if you want to use that type of pricing behaviour. And then some other parts of the world are considering whether it should be banned altogether. So that's not something we've necessarily seen in New Zealand, but I suspect it's only a question of time before that happens here.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll switch between questions here, because I've just got one that's come in from the audience, which I think is quite pertinent based on what some of what we've touched on today. But in terms of reviews, could it be acceptable for staff to leave reviews about products of the business they work for if it was clearly disclosed that the person was a staff member and it was their genuine review based on their experience with the product?
Yes, that's fine,
Yeah.
except that that's not what happened
Right.
in the brand developer's case. So that would be fine, because then you work there, you've used the product, you give a rating, and as a consumer you make a judgment call about whether you give the same weight to that rating as someone who's completely independent. But that would be fine.
It's about the disclosure.
Yeah, especially with the disclosure that was wrapped around that. That
Yeah.
makes it really, no problem.
Again, I'll just throw this out there, but in terms of enforcement, do we have all the tools we need, or is there anything missing? Either of you can go for it.
Maybe I'll start and Anne can follow up.
Yeah.
Look, we're pretty pleased with the fact that our two main statutes, the Commerce Act and the Fair Trading Act, have both been in the process of being amended in ways that I think are going to be helpful. So so that's good. That said, we think markets are always moving quickly, and go back to the recent OECD report 2024. What they said was New Zealand, because of our economic challenges, we need competition settings that are at the international frontier. That's going to keep moving. The nature of business and business models keep evolving as well. So I think I don't think there's a set and forget situation, and we do look around the world and see some other things that we might like.
Like codes.
Like codes.
Like code making powers, which would be a flexible tool to prevent conduct before it becomes harmful, but not necessarily over a long-term period of time. Yeah. But there's one that I think is really worth mentioning in the consumer space, and that's to do with unfair contract terms. So we have the ability as a commission to take a case where there are unfair contract terms in a contract. But there's two problems with that. One is only the commission can take a case, and that's different from other Fair Trading Act breaches where a private individual could take a case, and we think that needs to be fixed. The second problem is that if we believe a business has unfair contract terms like cancellation rights that are not fair, or limitation of liability provisions that are really out of whack, we have to go to the High Court and get a declaration that the term is unfair, and at that point that's it, right? And only if the business then continues to use that term could we then go back and get a penalty against the business. And we don't think that that's creating a strong enough deterrent. It's a really costly, inefficient way for us to administer the law. So we would really like some amendments to that law if possible.
Another one from the audience, toy safety, product safety, John. There's been a lot of chat about product safety in the media recently, which we will have seen. But the question is, where does product safety enter the work safe realm? And this person is thinking about the recent asbestos sand incident. So I guess to start, when is it ours? Because there's the unsafe goods notices, isn't there?
It's only ours if it gets put on a list,
right?
Actually, and that's so it's not that there's no general obligation on people to make sure that everything is safe, or not that we're responsible for anyway. So in order for us to be involved into enforcing this particular system, it has to be on a list, and that's why you would have seen recently corded blinds, discussion about corded blinds, which I think is now going to be put on the list.
That's right. But just to follow up on the asbestos sands, maybe what the person's getting at is that our jurisdiction in relation to this is relatively confined. It's to do with whether the product, there's a misrepresentation with the product, and there have been some questions raised with us about whether a product recall statement was sufficiently accurate or was misleading, and those are matters that I think we've said we're looking into. But I believe that's a relatively not insignificant but confined issue, whereas the actual safety of the product per se is not a commission. It will be other authorities that need to run those things to ground.
Yeah, thanks. Another question here. And this, we did ask this last year, but I'm wondering if anything's changed. I want to ask you about risk appetite, and particularly, what is your risk appetite right now when it comes to litigation? How would you describe it?
So the actual policy is categorised into a few different types of things, but as far as litigation is concerned, what I would say is that we, first of all, I'd say that we've got, I think I mentioned it earlier, where our litigation program is running around about 50% above recent historical averages. So we are getting through a lot of work. We're taking relatively ambitious cases. This prioritisation process we're talking about now is guiding the selection of those cases. I guess we're well aware that that if you never lose a case, maybe you're being a bit conservative. Not looking forward to losing a case, that said. But I think we've got a reasonably strong appetite for cases that we think are really important for the New Zealand economy, for New Zealand businesses, or for the development of the law.
No, I totally agree with that.
This person in the audience has picked up on the fact that that we've identified non-notified mergers as an enduring enforcement priority. That's the one change in terms of the enduring priorities this year. And they're curious as to whether you think New Zealand should adopt a mandatory merger notification regime similar to Australia's, or for now, do you think the voluntary regime remains appropriate? Over to you, John. You're getting nodded.
This was a matter for some discussion in the policy process that led to the bill that's currently working its way through Parliament, and where that process got to was keep it voluntary. We recognise that there's that it's a bit unusual, but it does actually, we think it works pretty well. But we do think that the non-notified mergers is one of the things that we have to do to make sure it continues to work well.
Yeah, I'd reinforce that. I think for the size of our economy, the voluntary process is working well, and I just want to emphasise that the amount of clearances that the public can see coming through, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. As John said, the team does a lot of surveillance work, monitoring whether there are things that need to be notified, and often when parties are contacted, they will bring things into us. And
courtesy letters as well.
Courtesy letters, exactly. So the courtesy letter process is a little bit more formal. They might write to us and explain why they think they don't need to seek a clearance, and we receive, I'm going to hazard a guess, but well over 50 of those a year, probably more. I'm probably understating it. So there's actually a lot of activity happening within that voluntary process, and I believe that all the working parts of it actually are performing pretty well.
Yeah, I think my memory of it is there's roughly 8 times as many matters that get looked at through that process as there is actual applications that we go through.
I'm going to jump to this one. Let's say I'm a Kiwi out there, wondering, looking at the Commission's work and thinking, what are a couple of bits of work that might impact the way I go about my business, whether it is looking at, or let's say it's shopping online, for example.
Yeah. Well, look, I think one thing that's worth mentioning, and it's a follow-on from the HelloFresh case, is that we have done some work in relation to subscription traps. So our compliance team has signed up for all sorts of services, a very long list of them, and then gone through the process that has no doubt tortured many people out there of trying to cancel and trying to understand whether that cancellation process is simple and straightforward or unreasonably difficult, right? And so that process has actually found some good results. Some businesses have done really well. Some businesses we found they have probably unnecessary fishhooks, and we've written to them and had some really good results about them making changes. And one or two we'll be looking at a bit more closely. So I think that's a really practical soft power thing that we're doing, that because if I name the services, they're probably things that many people out there would be using.
Yeah, and I'd also point to the, sometimes the things that are things that aren't there. So, for example, there's 29 ghost shops that don't exist anymore because of a compliance program our team ran against that kind of activity.
These are when the shop appears to be a New Zealand-based store.
Yeah, a Matakana boutique selling stuff with a woman and her daughter who've got some backstory, but actually it's just a drop shipping operation, importing stuff from wherever. And so we've had situations, and so we've been pretty effective in shutting those down. And in fact, we had an occasion recently to call up our colleagues in the ACCC and say that one of our ghost shops has moved to Australia, and they should have a look at it.
Yeah. And this might be one for you. This is around pricing. So someone's asked, is there a minimum period for which a WAS price needs to be set? And they've said, for example, what stops retailers just setting a high price for, let's say, an hour, and then immediately discounting it?
Yeah, well, there is no rule on that, and it will depend on what the product is and what the market's like, right? But it has to be, the general principle is it has to have been offered at the WAS price. Well, first of all, it has to have been offered at the WAS price. Can't just be a completely fake WAS price. And it has to have been offered at that price for a reasonable time to make the now price a valid comparator. And what that will be different in every kind of situation. So I think that's the general principle.
Yeah, we'll get to one more before we wrap, but and I'll just throw this one out there. Another person's said we get regular calls about pork products non-compliant with country of origin regulations. Major retailer deli meat sections are particularly non-compliant, this person says. Separately, imported ham and bacon products being misleading as Kiwi or NZ in their packaging slogans. They've asked whether there's any planned enforcement activity there, but I'll also ask you as well, any planned enforcement / are you sort of cognizant of this?
Tell us about it. I think historically the Commission has taken quite a number of cases around country of origin not being right, and all those claims about being made in New Zealand. I mean, there's quite a lot of law around that, when you can say that and when you can't. So look, if people are seeing things that they're worried about, Nick, I think you're going to do a plug for our hotline.
Hotline, good idea.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Anne and John. We managed to get through a lot of questions, so really appreciate your time this afternoon. And thank you very much to everybody for joining us. As Anne just said, there was a little plug there at the end which we wanted to put in, which is, I guess, sort of a bit of a call to action, where if you see any behaviour out there, whether it be the example that we've just read out that is concerning to you, please do go onto our website and make sure you report a concern. That's all we've got time for today, but a couple of things to note just before we close. If you want to leave a review, and in fact we want your reviews, we want to try and improve these things, that should be popping up on your screen now with a prompt. And secondly, our enforcement priorities are now online. And I understand this video was buffering for some of you while you were watching it. We apologise for that, but if you do want to rewatch it, it will be up on our YouTube channel and on our website very shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to talking to you again on the same topic next year. Mā te wā.